Hey guys, welcome back. Modii here, and we're here for another one of Modi's Monday with Modi's Monday Mania, whatever the hell it's called. Anyways, doesn't matter. Welcome back, guys. So last episode we kind of covered Circuit City. That one's a little bit tough because, mind you, it's been 18 years, 17 years since I worked there, so it was quite a long time ago. I have very spotty memories. I have a lot of memories about people that you don't know doing stuff that wouldn't make sense because you don't know them, but whatever. So, but anyways, what we're going to get into today, and this might actually be a multi-part one because this is one that I worked at for a good amount of time, was I worked at a place called Game Crazy. And for any of you guys that don't know, Game Crazy was a video game store a lot like GameStop or one of those type of places. We sold new and used. We took in trades, systems, games, accessories, that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of... They weren't as big as GameStops and some of those other companies, so a lot of you guys may not know them. They were actually part of a company called Hollywood Video. Hollywood Video was a movie rental place, and in 1999 they basically saw how places like GameStop and EB and Software Etc. and all those places were doing and thought they would get into the mix. And what they did was kind of smart because they would take existing portions of their video rental stores. Now, for anybody who doesn't know who Hollywood Video is, I guess I should give a little background on that. Hollywood Video was like Blockbuster. It's a competitor of Blockbuster. Okay, there's still a few of you out there who don't know what I'm talking about. Blockbuster was a video rental store. Imagine Redbox, but bigger and with people in it. And that help? All right, digressing back. All right, so Hollywood Video in 1999 decided that they wanted to get into the video game industry, which was pretty smart because they rented games there for years, just like Blockbuster and all these other places did. And this gave them an opportunity because a lot of the time they'd have games, and then when new games would come out, they'd have to pull down games, off the shelves to be able to make room for the new ones. And this gave them a place to basically funnel those games into. I think that's kind of how it got started. Now, I was working in Circuit City, but I was shopping at Game Crazy because Circuit City didn't take trades, and I was a dad with two little kids, so I didn't have a ton of money, and I still wanted to play games, and I still had crazy passion for video games and the retail side of video games. So I used to shop there. It was actually on my way home. So when I was at Circuit City, and here's my house, GameStop or Game Crazy was kind of in the middle. And so I would pass by there every day to and from work, and so I'd pop in and kind of get to know the people that worked there. I didn't hang out there much. I was never one to hang out in a store. I always thought that was weird. We'll get to that when we get to the GameStop part. There's gonna be a lot of fire with the GameStop part, but plus the kind of cool thing is at the time, Game Crazy kind of carried everything. At the time, this is leading right out of when I worked at Circuit City, so the current systems at the time were Xbox, PS2, and GameCube were the current systems, that generation. But they were still kind of new. There wasn't a ton of games for them. So Game Crazy, when I started there in 2003, I know in the last video I said I left Circuit City in 2002. It was actually 2003. I think. I don't remember. Anyways, but they sold an original Nintendo, Super Nintendo. They sold Genesis. They sold some Saturn games. They didn't sell a lot of like the really off-the-wall games that much. We didn't have any Neo Geo games or Jaguar games or anything. We didn't have Atari or anything that old. So it kind of had a retro and current feel to it, which was pretty cool. I really liked that. Original like Game Boy Black and White, Game Boy Color games. At this point, the Game Boy SP was out, which was like the flip one. I don't know. The DS had not come out yet. The DS had not come out. And I had gotten, and this has always amused me. One of the employees who worked at Game Crazy ended up getting a second job at the Circuit City I worked at. And he used me as a reference. I knew him because I talked to him all the time at the Game Crazy when I would go in. And he applied, got a job at Circuit City, a different department than I worked in, didn't matter. But one day I was leaving for lunch, and I was walking by, and he called me over, and he said, "Hey, you know what? I just heard that the assistant manager at Game Crazy is leaving." And I was like, "Really? That's awesome," because I really couldn't, at this point I was working pretty much full-time at Circuit City. I'd gotten a couple, 2 or 3 raises over the time I was there. So at the time I was making the most money I had ever made, which still wasn't great. Now, mind you, I want to say I was making like $11 or $12 an hour, which might not seem that mind-blowing now, but back then, I mean, I don't even know if minimum wage was like $7 or something like that. So it was, trust me, it was way better than I had gotten paid any other time. So I was a little nervous about giving that up. So, but what the hell? I stopped by Game Crazy on my lunch break because at this time I was going home for lunch because I lived, I don't know, 5 minutes away from Circuit City, about 2 minutes away from Game Crazy. So I thought I'll stop in, fill an application real quick. It was funny. This is for some of you younger people out there. This will blow your mind. It wasn't a paper application, but it wasn't on a computer. It was on a phone, a specific phone. So you'd go in, you had to go to the Hollywood side. This phone was dedicated to that, and it was an automated voice that would ask you questions, and then you would record your answers. Some answers were for like yes or no. It would be like, press 1 for yes, press 2 for no. And then it'd be like, what is your, experience? And you had to say everything. It was super weird. Later on, they got one that had a little keyboard. It was almost like a weird texting home phone. It was dumb. Anyways, so I filled out the application, went home, had lunch, the whole deal. Didn't think much of it. Went back to work. And about a week later, I ended up getting a call from the district manager. Now, for any of you guys that don't know, in these kind of stores, you have, your normal employees, and then you have like an assistant, a store manager, and those are what's in a store. And it's the same thing for GameStop, so you'll hear me talk about that again later. And then they have a district manager, which generally is somebody who's the direct boss of all the store managers in a district, and maybe, depending on the company and the size, may have 10 or 12 stores. And really their job is just to go make sure that all these store managers are doing their jobs. And then above them there's a regional manager, which they have maybe 100 stores. It really depends on the company. Game Crazy was a lot smaller. I want to say at the time the GameStop set of places was maybe 5,000 stores, and I think we maybe had 2,500, maybe 3,000 nationwide. So the district manager calls me up and says, "Hey, would you mind coming in for an interview?" And of course, I'm elated. I'm excited. Sure, no problem. Tell me where, tell me when. They do. So I go in, and at this point, I'm still in my early 20s. And I go in, and I think it was during a lunch break at work. I'd gone in, or I don't know, maybe I'd taken the day off. I don't remember. Remember, I wrote my own schedule at Circuit City, so it wasn't that hard. So I go in, and I have a sit-down interview, but it's not with the district manager. It's with another store manager from a different store. Now, mind you, I really don't know how this company works. I've never worked for a company that, a dedicated video game company, or really even a company this small. I worked at Circuit City, which is a big box store. Back in the day, I worked at Kmart, big box store. Anyways, so I'm like, okay, whatever. So I go in and I have the interview, and it's pretty cut and dry. We're doing the whole thing. And the manager who's interviewing, she tells me that the district manager is there in the building, but he's taking care of something else, which I was like, okay, well, whatever. I don't know what the hell she's talking about, but she made it seem like it was a pretty big deal. So I'm like, okay, no problem. So she does the whole interview, and she's like, oh, cool. Well, give us a few minutes. Let me go talk to my boss, the DM, and maybe he'll come and talk to you. And I'm like, all right, cool, great. So he comes in, and he, sits down and asks me some real kind of nonchalant, kind of preliminary questions. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? I don't know, sitting here. And I'm here, but grayer. That's really my answer, I guess, at that point. And so we have the interview, and I'm talking to him, and he's like, and he seemed really happy. He seemed kind of, he had talked to the other store manager for about 10 minutes while I just waited in there. And, he comes back, and he seems, asks me the questions and whatnot. And he goes, well, we got a couple people that we're currently looking at for the store manager position. And, we'll once we finish our interviews, we'll let you know. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I go, I didn't realize that I was applying for the store manager position. Somebody had told me that the assistant manager was leaving. And he goes, oh, no, not to my knowledge, but unfortunately we had to let the store manager go. So it's actually his position. Do you have an issue with that? And of course I'm like, no, I get to be the store manager and it's in a video game only store. I was so excited, but I was like, I played it cool. I was like, yeah, I think I would be interested in that. Whatever. I think I squealed and peed on him a little bit. Whatever. It doesn't matter. So yeah. Now, a little side note. This is something I found out much later. What was actually happening was this assistant manager wasn't leaving. I guess the kid was misinformed that told me at Circuit City that he was leaving. But it turns out that the store manager at the time, now we live pretty close to Mexico, and there's a lot of people who come up from Mexico and buy stuff in America, like just in their car, and then take it back and resell it in Mexico. Like they have stores. And at the time, Mexico was kind of like a generation behind the U.S. So like the GameCube was out here, but the 64 was huge in Mexico. Like people were going nuts for it. And they would come up and they would just try and buy as many games as possible. Now, most video game stores have policies on how many copies of a game you could buy and certain things like that. They're really not there to be distributors, to sell to other business, even if they're not in the same country. Well, apparently what happened, and I always found this very amusing, is that manager apparently had made deals with some of these vendors from Mexico. I don't know all the details, but from what I understand, he was kind of cutting them deals, giving them discounts, breaking policy, and whatnot for them. And this store manager I kind of knew, because remember, I had shopped there for like a couple of years before I got a job there. And I know he used to do real shady things, like he would, people would trade in PlayStation. This was when the PS1, remember the smaller PS1, not the PlayStation, but the PS1 had come out. People would trade those in, and then he would take them home, and he would open them up, and he would chip them. For anybody who doesn't know, that means changing out a chip in it, soldering in a new one, and when it does that, it takes away all the restrictions, and you can play burned games. PlayStation 1 games were all on CDs, so all you needed was an average CD burner. If you had the game, you'd put it in. You needed a program, which was not hard to find. It would copy the game, put it on a CD, and you could pop it in the system. So he was doing this with merchandise from the store. He was taking these PS1s, chipping them, and then what he'd do is he would sell you one, and it was like, let's say it was $100 in the store, he'd sell it for $150. It had to be cash. It was super sketchy. And then what he would do is he would then, after you gave him $150 and left with it, he would ring it up at $100 and pocket the rest of the money. Not why he got fired, believe it or not. So apparently one day, or actually a few days prior to my interview, one of those guys from Mexico came up and as a thank you to him, gave him a big bottle of tequila as kind of, a little, hey, thank you for hooking me up. Super shady. I think the guy from Mexico kind of had an idea about it, so he gave him this bottle. Once again, not really allowed to accept alcohol from customers, but the manager was an adult, not why he got fired. So one thing you have to realize is Game Crazies were these small stores, and they were all put inside of Hollywood Videos. So that's how Hollywood Video was smart, and I'm kind of jumping back and forth, but we'll get there. So the Hollywood Video would section out a part. They would build kind of pseudo temporary walls, and they would build a second door on the front, so you had different entrances. But there was an entrance in from the Hollywood side as well, which of course anybody who went to Hollywood Video thought we were the porn section, so that was fun. But anyways, but both stores had separate staff, separate managers, separate assistant managers. No one who worked on that side could do anything. They couldn't be behind my counter, and vice versa. They were completely separate entities. But they had one rent, one electric bill, one water bill, one alarm bill for both businesses. It was actually pretty smart. So, they had two staffs, but they had two stores, so it worked out pretty well. And at the time, the video rental industry was still really thriving. So apparently what this store manager did is that the evening he got this tequila, he ends up going over to the Hollywood side. Now, our store would close, normal like 9 or 10, something like that, like normal kind of resale. But rental places used to stay open till midnight, sometimes 1 o'clock in the morning. That way, even, 10 o'clock at night, you want to go get a movie, there's a place open for you, right? Blockbuster used to be the same way. And he goes over to the Hollywood side and pours 3 cups of tequila, little like the plastic solo cups, pours like a shot of tequila in these 3 cups, and then gives them to the 2 employees that are working at Hollywood. Now, they are on the clock. They are working. This isn't in the parking lot. This isn't in a back room. This isn't at someone's house. This is in the store while these 2 employees are on the clock. Also, both of these employees are not legally old enough to drink. And he's giving them alcohol. Now, he's off the clock. The Game Crazy was closed. He's off the clock. He gives them alcohol. And the 3 of them then proceed to drink 1 or 2 shots each right there at the front counter. For security reasons, at most businesses, there's cameras pointed at the front counter. There's customers in the store. There's customers in and out of the doors they're standing next to. And then he goes on his merry way and goes home, and then is very surprised when he finds out he's getting fired. Now, here's the crazy part. While I'm in there for my interview in the Game Crazy office, over in the Hollywood Video office where the camera monitors were set up, was the DM and this store manager. I was having my interview while he was getting fired. Like, they weren't even waiting for the body to be cold. I think when my interview started, he still had a job. When my interview was over, he didn't have a job anymore. So yeah, that always kind of blew my mind. Sorry, I gotta check my time here. Okay. Yeah, so he got fired for that. So, I go home and I was excited. Just the prospect of it. I was like a little kid on like Christmas Eve. I remember laying in bed and being like, oh man, wouldn't it be crazy if blah, 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 and blah, 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 this, that, and the other thing. Wouldn't it be amazing if I did this? I could be a store manager and whatnot. And they really liked the fact that I had been the video game lead at Circuit City. They didn't really quite understand what that was, but I think it played in my favor. I think they thought I was the video game manager. I'm cool with that. But the fact that I was writing schedules, I had mentioned, I didn't lie about anything, but they may have had assumptions on their own. A few days later, I end up getting a phone call from the DM. And he's like, hey, Modii, because that's totally my name. He says, hey, are you still interested in the store manager position? I'm like, yeah, of course I am. That'd be great. He goes, and I want to say this was on like a Thursday or a Friday. And I was like, he's like, how soon can you start? I'm like, well, how soon can you need me? And he basically says, now at this point I was kind of burned out of Circuit City and the excitement of this Game Crazy thing, a store I've been shopping at for 2 years, and it was going to be mine. Not only was I getting a job there, but I was going to be the store manager. A lot of that hadn't set in yet. And, you know, about there's, trust me, that's the next video. So yeah, he offers me the job, and I say sure, and I'm like, you know, he's like, how soon can you come in? And I'm like, how soon do you need me? He goes, Monday, but he goes, but, you know, I understand if you need to put 2 weeks into your job, but just, you know, we don't have a manager right now. We don't want to leave it empty too long. And I was basically like, screw Circuit City. I didn't say this to him, but I was like, screw them. I got that call. I actually think it was on a Friday. It was during my lunch break. That's right. I was at home. I was eating when he called me because I remember I went outside because the girls were running around the house making a bunch of noise. So I went outside to talk to him. And I came in and told my wife at the time, and she was super excited and whatnot. I don't even think I asked how much I was going to make. I ended up doing salary, which I never had salary, so that was crazy. So I think I ended up calling him back, and he told me how much I make. I don't remember what it is. Looking back, it should have been more when I look at the job, but it was more than I was making. And it was salary. I got a steady paycheck every single week. Didn't matter, you know, I got sick time, I got vacation time, I had insurance, all kinds of stuff. So I go back to Circuit City, and that at the time, I hated working at Circuit City as much as anybody hates working at their job. I didn't extra hate it. I hated the store manager, and maybe we'll do a Circuit City recap later, but I really hated the store manager. But other than that, my best friend at the time, Scott, was working there, and even some of the other managers I was cool with. But that drive from my house back to work at the end of my lunch break just felt amazing. It felt like what I assumed someone getting out of prison felt like, you know, and was never going back. And I went into Circuit City, and I was like, you know, I purposely went to the store manager because I didn't like him. And I just let him know, I'm like, hey, I've been offered a store manager job like yours at a local business. So yeah, but they need me Monday. I'm super important. I'm very important. They need me Monday. So yeah, and by the way, I write my own schedule, so I have weekends off, and it's Friday at lunch, so it's actually my last day. And he's like, well, are you going to stick around for a shift? I'm like, sure. I only had like 2-3 hours left. I took my lunch really late. And so I was like, sure. I hung out. And I literally just hung out for the rest of the day. It was awesome. But yeah, and that's how I got the job. Last little bit on that, it turns out there was only 2 people up for the job, myself and another gentleman. Now, the other gentleman on paper had way more qualifications than I did. He had actually had store manager experience. But here's the funny part. It had turned out on his paperwork that about 4 years prior, he had legally changed his name, his first name and his last name. And when, because the DM had noticed, like, there was no history on this person, social security number wise, criminal record wise, work wise. This guy did not talk about anything that had happened prior to the last 4 years. Now, of course, you can say, oh, maybe witness relocation. They generally make stuff up for them to give them a past. This guy had no past 4 years ago. And when the DM asked him, you know, well, could I get your prior name? Obviously for background criminal checks and things like that. The guy was like, no. And he just refused to give him any information prior to 4 years. So, I guess I was the best person for the job. Out of the 2 people, I was the least sketchy as hell. So, I took that as a victory. I took that's the driving force behind most I do. As long as I'm the least sketchy person involved in a situation, I'm golden. I'm golden, pony boy. You know what I'm saying? So, anyways, so I always thought that was an interesting story of how I got hired at Game Crazy. There is going to be a few Game Crazy stories. I got a lot of fond memories, and a lot of this is going to kind of transition the GameStop one where things are going to get pretty intense. I have a lot of thoughts on things, so you're going to want to make sure to check that out. So, once again, thank you guys so much. I hope you guys are enjoying these, Mondays with Modii. I'm having fun with them. Yeah, next episode we're going to delve a little bit more into Circuit City. I'll tell you some about the business, maybe a little about some of the employees I had, some of the situations with customers and things like that I ran into, and just honestly, the next episode is probably going to be a lot about the huge learning curve I had to go through because I knew nothing about being a manager, and it was actually pretty cool and pretty exciting. And I've even taken some of the stuff I learned from there and moved it towards my career in YouTube. So so once again, guys, thank you guys so much for hanging out. Thank you so much for supporting the Pinky and the Beard channel. We love you guys so much. I love seeing your guys' comments. You know, whatever you guys got to say, put it down there. I love reading that stuff. I read every single one of them. And don't forget to check out Heather and I's Patreon. Helps us out greatly with getting better equipment. We bought two extra cameras for this. I think we want to start get some better audio for a lot of the vlog stuff, so that's kind of a next thing on the old hit list there. So go check out the Patreon. A lot of cool things we try and give you guys. And until next Monday, I want to thank you all so much for hanging out. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.